Material Differences. Chapter 13, Part 3. One for the Road. The cathedral was just like the dozens he'd seen before. Massive pillars made of marble inlaid with gold and other rare metals. A blend of moving art screens, metalwork, and masonry filled the walls and pillars with depictions of the heaven all drones dreamed of being allowed entry into. As much as they spoke of sharing, he couldn't help but notice only the best got access to the highest level of their shared simulation. The pair quietly moved along the side of the pillars until they reached a massive door at the end of the hall they'd slipped into, the inner sanctum of the cathedral where the bishop lived. They could hear her muffled speech outside, so she was clearly still in. Two guardians stood watch at the entrance. They had heavy armor on, so taking them out stealthily wasn't really an option. Tanya motioned to Jaeger to stay where he was. Then she used hand gestures to indicate she was going to flank as far up as she could, so she could get a proper angle to lobotomize them. Jaeger gave her a quick thumbs up and settled in next to his pillar. Then he slowly reached up and rotated the mirror cloak so that the opening was behind him. The inside of the material let him see a sort of blurry copy of what was on the other side. It was like looking at an impressionist rendering of reality. Then he slowly leaned out from behind the pillar, giving the cloak plenty of time to adjust as he raised his rifle to get a clean shot at the first guardian. He couldn't use the scope like this and had to feel out the shot more than anything. There was the PWAP of Tanya's first lobotomy shot, his smart plugs diminishing the already suppressed sound. As he saw the back of the guardian's VR rig break, he pulled the trigger of his own rifle, the shot ripping a hole through his cloak, and even with the smart plugs greatly diminishing the sound of the rifle to his ears in reality, it echoed loudly around the chamber. The shot found its mark, and the bullet smashed through the guardian's faceplate, rattling around inside his head as it didn't come out of the back of the heavy armor helmet. Immediately, Jaeger turned and brought the rifle up through the rip in his cloak to aim at the next guardian. PWAP went Tanya's rifle, and he fired again, this time double-tapping to be sure. Tanya's shot smashed through the back of the VR rig first, and then his two shots buried themselves in the guardian's face. He watched and waited breathlessly before both large bodies tumbled over to the ground with heavy thuds. Her shots had severed their link to the consciousness moments before he killed them, so the local hub should only mark them as having interrupted or failed connections, and not as being dead. It was an extremely narrow window that they had killed them in, and he doubted anyone with less experience could have pulled it off. But he was worried about the loud reports of his rifle that had boomed throughout the antechamber. The door to the inner sanctum was thick, but was it thick enough? The bishop was silent. Then his shoulder sagged with relief as he heard her muffled voice once more. No hive sirens either. Tanya peered from around a pillar further up and waved him forward. As he rushed up, she turned to punch a code into a much smaller door in the wall. Made sense there would be a personal door instead of the massive wall-sized door in the center. As they stepped through, they were hidden from the center of the room by a bank of servers, likely the local heavens simulation for the highest-ranking members of his particular hive hub. To his surprise, before he went further in, Tanya waved for him to hold fast. He wasn't sure what she saw or heard, but respecting her judgment, he tucked in close to the nearest server and posted up. Tanya gave him a strange look then and pulled her mirror cloak off. Jaeger frowned in confusion, especially when she walked past him and into the main room without any attempts at being sneaky. Just as she stepped past the end of the servers, there was a surge of light, and he saw an energy cage drop onto Tanya's position, sealing her inside. "Ooh, I knew you'd come, my lovely tunnel rat." Jaeger's rifle snapped back at the door they'd come through, sure that guardians were about to pour through, but he didn't hear any telltale heavy stomps running towards him. So he carefully glanced around the corner of the pillar and server he was concealed in, and saw the bishop walking casually up to the cage Tanya was inside. He could hear her speech outside and realized it was a recording, so she had heard his gunshots. What was going on? "I've come to kill you," Tanya said simply. "No, you haven't," the bishop scoffed. Unlike her perfect form in the vid screen with long gold hair, flowing robes, or near-divine appearance, the real bishop was something of a letdown. She had very short, shaggy, dirty blonde hair, somewhat mousy features, and a simple, rather dirty Simu suit. They were essentially jumpsuits designed for comfort, while in long-term VR, usually while laying in a nurture cradle. "We both know you're here because deep down you want to be a part of this." "You do know I can shoot you between the bars of this cage," Tanya mentioned as she raised her rifle and trained it on the bishop. But you won't. We both know you want to be a part of this. You crave it! To feel the love, to feel the caring, to be a part of something so much greater than yourself, to fill that void within your heart with something more meaningful than alcohol, to become one with us, with me, so that you'll truly be able to heal, to let those old pains wither and fade until they aren't even distant memories anymore. You want this and more. Why else come back? I know you said you'd return to kill me, but you're not even wearing that explosive vest you said you'd bring. Deep down you want what we all want. Jaeger frowned as he heard the bishop keep talking. There was way more to this than Tanya had let on, wasn't there? You want love, companionship, and an emotional bond with a new family, all of which I can give you. I even come to you now devoid of my rig. It's just me, in the flesh! But if you shoot me, you know there's no way out of the cage. Eventually someone will find you, and they won't understand why you're here. They'll call you an assassin and gun you down. Please, my tunnel rat. The bishop reached her hand through the crackling energy bars, offering it to Tanya. You can't do this alone. That's just it. I'm not alone, Tanya replied and leveled her rifle at the confused-looking bishop. Pdwap pawap pdwap pawap. Jaeger blinked as Tanya unloaded her rifle into the small woman, making her stagger back as bullets slammed into her body, blood and chunks of flesh going flying as the bullets made her body dance to a tune that was all too familiar to Jaeger. Why Tanya felt the need to empty her magazine was beyond him, but eventually she ran dry. Tanya stood there in silence for several long seconds before finally speaking up. Get me out of this cage! Jaeger got out from his spot and walked forward, past the meat Swiss cheese that was the bishop's body. The room was filled with books, computer systems, and religious icons of the hive, so it was easy to spot the out-of-place handmade switch soldered into one of the panels. He pulled it, and the energy cage around Tanya vanished. They turned to both stand over the bullet-ridden mound of meat that was their target. She wasn't wearing her VR rig, Jaeger said first, unsure how to address Tanya's conversation with the bishop. Could mean they won't know she's dead for a while. Unless she has one of those heart sensors, Tanya pointed out. Just after saying that, sirens howled out around them, making Jaeger wince for a moment before his smart plugs could adjust to drown it out. You just had to say it, he sighed. That's just coincidence, she protested. It would have happened anyway. Me saying that just then had no bearing on the course of events in reality. Never test the law of Murphy, Jaeger gravely replied, which made Tanya just sigh and shake her head. Whatever. Time to kill our way out of here. She quickly reloaded her rifle and turned to look at the doorway they'd come in from. But Jaeger spotted something and headed across the room to get a better look. Hey! Private lift over here! He said, the comm unit making sure she could hear him easily even across the room. It wasn't even locked, so he opened it up and stepped inside the lift before he looked back at Tanya. She was opening fire on something, or rather someone coming up the hall, and he heard the loud thud of a guardian hitting the floor. Hold them off! And then get over here! With that, he saw her jerk 2 grenades from her vest and then hurl them through the door. This will delay them! She growled out as she ran across the room towards him. He heard the muffled rumble and boom of her high-X grenades. Without smart plugs, he was positive he'd have gone deaf long ago. Though the screaming that followed wasn't muffled, it just made it clear she'd hit something. Once she jumped into the lift, he hit the button for the top floor, figuring it would get them close to the cruiser. This is going to make things much easier, Jaeger noted as they could feel the lift quickly carry them up the spire. You didn't know this was here? No, Tanya shook her head. You really didn't even try to form an escape plan, did you? He asked. Until you showed up, I didn't think I'd have any need of one. She sighed out and slumped against the back wall. She looked far more exhausted than he expected given their limited combat, especially since she was a synth. So, are we going to talk about that thing between you and the bishop? He asked then, unable to hold off any longer. There is no thing between me and the bishop, she growled out. It really seems like there was a thing between you and the bishop. Jaeger shrugged a little. Well, there wasn't a thing, Tanya hissed in reply. I mean, I didn't even know you liked girls. Jaeger tossed a hand up to indicate his surprise. I was always drunk. All right, it doesn't count, Tanya screamed, and Jaeger winced a little as the comm unit enhanced her voice in his ear. But he just grinned at her as he got more of the truth he wanted. She just closed her eyes then, and slumped down in the back of the lift, head in her hands, letting her rifle drop to her side. Always, huh? Implying it was a multiple time sort of thing? What did you two even talk about? He asked, not letting up. I don't know, Tanya groaned out into her hands. Jaeger arched a brow down at her, but she just repeated it. I don't know. I was always blackout drunk. I remember thinking I'd realized how to make them stop. I could just talk to them. No killing. No violence. No guns. Just talk them into surrendering. It was all so clear, so perfectly amazingly obvious. And then, I don't even know. So, I tried again. I thought I got just the right level of drunk, and it felt so obvious. And I went up there. She trailed off as he could fill in the blanks. I just kept trying to get the right level of drunk to remember what I first thought of to talk them into giving up. Yeah, I hate to break it to you, but you didn't discover something magical to tell her. There's no perfect argument to talk the hive into changing. That's just you being drunk. Jaeger reached down, holding his hand out for her. With a sigh, she grabbed his hand, and he helped her to her feet, just as the lift stopped. I really need to sober up, don't I? She asked, and he nodded. As the door to the lift opened, they had their guns at the ready, but they found themselves in an old office that looked untouched since the war. They slowly walked out over broken tables, glass, and office furniture as they saw the cruiser hull ahead of them sticking into the crumbling section of the damaged spire. That's actually... Don't say it. Jaeger quickly cut her off, knowing she was about to say it was lucky. Not a damn word. If you dare incur the wrath of Murphy, I swear I'll kill you myself, he threatened. Why are you so superstitious? She scoffed as they headed forward. Why aren't you? He accused in return. He did agree with her they'd been very lucky, but he didn't dare say it. There was a scar along the side of the hull that they could climb through, and he was surprised to see most of the interior of the ship wasn't stripped for parts. He was wondering why when he saw the boarding defense turrets start to rise up out of the walls. He quickly found the nearest security console and frantically tapped in his old Revenant security code. After a moment, the turrets sank back into place, and he breathed a sigh of relief. "Kay, escape pods are this way," he pointed after glancing at a local ship map on the wall. "Think we should go back and kill a few more Guardians? We're in the heart of the spire. Maybe now is the time to strike," Tanya suggested. "Who's the superior officer here?" Jaeger asked then. "Oh, right. It's me." "No, we're not doing that. Killing the bishop should throw them into disarray, especially if she was the sort of paranoid sysadmin who didn't share privileges or passwords with any of her underlings." "Fine," Tanya muttered. Their walk through the old cruiser hull was thankfully quiet, at least in the sense that they were alone and left to their own devices. The way the metal kept groaning and creaking around them made it far less actually quiet. Jaeger kept fearing it would all give at any moment, but thankfully they made it to the nearest bay of escape pods, half of which were still in place. Jaeger was very thankful all their old Revenant codes could access virtually all Void military systems as he activated a pod for them. They climbed in and strapped themselves into place before he started the launch. However, once they were secure and the countdown begun, Tanya spoke up. "Hey, aren't these designed to land close to the possible landing site in the event of a crash?" she asked. "Yeah?" Jaeger asked, unsure where she was going with it. "Well, since it's already crashed, doesn't that mean it'll dump us around the base of the mountain, where all the fighting is?" As she said that, they both looked at the timer. Was all Jaeger could get out before the pod launched, pinning them both to their seats as the G-force hit them. The pod around them rattled and shook, and after a painfully short launch into the air, they started to tumble back down to the ground. Right around the base of the mountain, like Tanya said. They couldn't really talk or communicate effectively then, as they were tossed around inside the small capsule, but Jaeger was praying that whoever made the naval escape pods wasn't the lowest bidder. They jerked hard as the retro thrusters kicked in, and while it wasn't smooth in the slightest, they hit the ground hard, but in one piece. After a moment, their restraints released and the door opened. They were quick to dash out into the ruins of the city. The escape pod had come down in a pile of rubble that was all too common around the base of the mountain. Looking around, Jaeger didn't see any good cover, but he quickly pointed to a small alcove formed from the wall of whatever building had once stood here and the hulk of a transport vital. Just as they both tucked themselves into the corner, they could hear approaching people. Do not engage until the last possible moment. Maybe they'll miss us. Jaeger knew it was very unlikely, but there was a slim chance. Just try not to make any noise, he whispered, and Tanya nodded. The footsteps were getting closer. Jaeger tucked the torn remains of the only half-function mirror cloak around him, even as he gripped his rifle hard. There was a chance, if they stayed quiet. Jaeger slowly turned his head to give Taya a death glare as her faulty off-gassing system went off in the worst possible time. She was blushing hard, so at the very least he knew she'd die embarrassed. "Tunnel rat!" he heard a voice call out, and Tanya immediately sagged with relief. "Oh, thank God! It's the militia! Anteater!" she called out, leaving their little corner to hold her rifle up and wave as she saw militia troops entering the area around them. "The bishop is dead." We figured. Their troops went crazy a little, and then retreated a while back. Then we saw that pod launch from the old cruiser. How the hell did you make it out of there? Jaeger slowly got up and saw a figure in makeshift construction rig power armor walk down out of the rubble. When he lifted a repurposed nail gun at Jaeger, however, he froze and was about to open fire. "Friend. He's a friend." Tanya stepped between Jaeger and the militia commander. "He's with me. He's how I made it out." The soldiers all relaxed then. "Can we get a ride? I know this isn't the end of things, but my friend and I are needed elsewhere." "Sure. We'll give you a ride back into town." The commander nodded. With a wave, the troops around them began to move away from the mountain. Jaeger was about to fall into step with the others, but then saw Tanya open the butt of her rifle. It was an odd time to get the cleaning kit out. Then he saw the 2 Spaceliner-sized small bottles of Mooncat she pulled out. It was his favorite. "Seriously?" he asked, despite being glad to see good alcohol for a change. She just gave him a sad smile and handed him one of the little bottles. "One for my baby," was her soft reply. He could see the pain in her eyes. Whatever had gone on with the bishop was obviously deeper than he realized. Jaeger hesitated and then reached out to take the offered bottle. He twisted the cap off, and then held the bottle back out so he could clink it against hers. "One for the road," he answered, and then drank the entire contents of the small bottle. He closed his eyes and savored the smooth, spiced moonshine. When he opened his eyes again, Tanya leaned over slightly, her shoulder rubbing against his. After a moment, he shifted his rifle over and then hugged her around the shoulder, their heads lightly touching. He wanted to reprimand her for a dozen things, scream at her for a dozen more, but it could all wait. Because he remembered the last thing she'd told the bishop. She wasn't alone. It reminded him that his kids weren't his only children. As sergeant major of the team, they were all his kids. And none of them should be alone again.